welcome. I'm actually going to have breakfast, although it's 2 p.m. Sometimes I have breakfast very late. As a rule, in the morning, I just have a big cup of coffee. So, what I want to do is doing this for a particular reason. I want to start out with the do now list of fact versus opinion. It's amazing this little gas burner how much heat it generates. I'm going to let the residual heat cook the rest of the 2 eggs. In the meantime, I'm going to add my other protein. Okay, I'll let that warm up a little bit. Okay. Now, question. I'll read this from my little camp stool over here. Camping out in the backyard. Well, not really, but okay. Let me ask you this: the statement here, is this fact or opinion? Sardines and eggs are the best breakfast you can have. Fact or opinion? What do you say? Let's find out. these over here. Get my sardines and eggs. Mm. Mm. Just ever good. Glad I warmed the sardines up. They take on a new, unique, nutty flavor. Mm. I have to make sure Mr. D gets a copy of this. That, I think the Culinary Cafe needs to get a copy of this. This might be a new breakfast item. Mm. Oh man. Well, let's get some nice yolk on this sardine here. Ooh, it's ever good. That guy here, my big deaf white cat crying inside the house. He probably smells this and wants some. Mm. Mm. It's ever good. I love it. These armor all for everything. Okay, let's get to the real business. Why this demonstration? Okay, this statement. This is the best meal going. Sardines and eggs. Oh man, Mr. D, better watch out. Mr. John's in trouble. Just kidding. Okay, now fact versus opinion. Is this a fact or an opinion? Well, let's be honest. It's an opinion, and I'll tell you why. I'm gonna get out my little, see whether or not you guys can see this or not. Okay, there we are. Okay. Fact. Any statement that's made, if it can be proven, it's usually a fact. If it can't be proven, it may just be an opinion. That's when we come on to this portion of my little homemade blackboard here. based on opinions. Opinions. It's something that is usually based on feeling or belief. It may or may not be fact. You know, I'm out in the sun. It is hot. It's 75 degrees. That's an opinion. The reason I state that's an opinion is because that's how I feel. I wish it was 65. I'd be more comfortable. I'm not a hot weather person. I think everybody in my classroom over the years has known that. You know, not too many people just wear a shirt and vest out in the snow. You're looking at one of them. The sun is approximately 93 million miles in distance from the Earth. Now, that's a fact because it's been measured by scientists. Again, that is a fact. It can be proven. It's scientific record. Now, me saying it's a hot day, that's my opinion because I have to brush my teeth later. How was that so good? I make that supper. Okay. So again, getting back to this, opinions. All right, they're based on both, based on belief or feeling, and they may not necessarily be based on fact. Or I should say, they can't. They may or may not be proven. I should say it's more accurate. So again, opinions are based on feelings and beliefs. I believe it to be a hot day out. That's just an opinion. Later on this week, it's supposed to get up in the 80s, maybe 90s. I'm really going to be miserable. All right. But some of you guys might love that. You might say, oh, that's normal. And then in 6 months, when we have winter, I might be out really smiling and happy. And then you guys might be saying, oh my God, I hate it. It's too cold. Again, it's opinion based on feeling and belief. Now, getting back to my sardine question here, I posted it as, you know, sardines and eggs are the best meal. It's the best breakfast you can have. Okay? Again, it's an opinion. All right. I don't know too many people who crack open a couple eggs and then put, you know, half a can of sardines in the pan and heat it up. Once I've been out in the woods and remote areas where, you know, what I just had was a gourmet meal. And I actually like it, believe it or not. But that's, again, an opinion based on a feeling and belief. My feeling is it's pretty good. If I were to give it to somebody else, they might say, ew, where's the bathroom? They're going to run in there and throw up. But I'll put something else here to make it a fact. Okay? Sardines are a source of omega-3 fatty acids. Is that opinion or a fact? Well, it's an effect. It's a fact. It could be proven. Nutritionists have proven that sardines are a source of omega-3 fatty acids, which are good for the heart and circulatory system. So, believe it or not, that breakfast that I had just now is actually not that bad. It's actually quite healthy for me. So, knowing that, okay, let's go over the do now list of fact versus opinion. Number one, I gave out 10 statements. It's easy to do. You guys can do 10 statements. It's not super hard to do. I know you guys have busy days. I do too. We all do. We can do it together. Number one, the fastest land dwelling creature is the cheetah. Is that fact or opinion? Well, it's a fact because it has been measured. Cheetahs have been clocked at going up to and over 70 miles an hour in short bursts. So it is the fastest land dwelling creature. Behind that is actually the pronghorn antelope. They can do about 65 miles per hour. I love pronghorns, anyways. Um, you probably know why I love them. Number two, Michael Jordan has a career average of 30.4 points per game. Is that fact measured. Uh, athletic play, athletes have their statistics measured and recorded. So you can go and do the math yourself, looking at in his career. Okay, in his career, you can go back in time and look at all of the things that like look at his plays and then average it out, and it'll be 30.4 points per game. So you can that's something that you can do. It can be proven. So it's a fact. Number three, George Washington was the first president of the United States under the Constitution. Well, again, that is fact. It's historical record. It's been written down. It's recorded. It's not an opinion. It's historical record. It's fact. Number four, the ugliest sea creature is the manatee. Well, the adjective ugly and its modified ugliest, it's an opinion because beauty is in the eye of the beholder. You can go down in Florida and you'll see them, and to some people they're ugly. Other people they actually like them, and there are organizations that are dedicated to preserving their lives, and you can adopt them. In other words, help protect their habitat from more development, like another condo taken over where they would once feed and breed, so to speak. Number five, Michael Jordan is the greatest basketball player of all time. Well, and I know some of you guys are into basketball. I'm not one of them. I'm not a big sports fan, anyways, unless it's hunting and fishing and stuff like that. So it's an opinion. The reason it's an opinion is because everybody has different values in which they attribute who they consider to be the greatest. Is he the greatest because of his point average per game? Is he the greatest because of the total number of points that he's accrued in his career? Did he come from a harsh background and rise up? Some people view that. It's all subjective, so it depends. Now, the other statement where he averaged 30.4, okay, that's a fact. That can be recorded. This here, greatest, that is based on opinion. Okay. Number six, there seems to be too much standardized testing in public schools. Well, is there? What's the scientific evidence? Well, it conflicts, to be honest, but it's an opinion. Some people believe that testing is necessary, and there are some people that believe that we need more testing. It's an opinion. Then there's also some people that believe that it should be eliminated. It should be more of an authentic assessment, kind of like a portfolio assessment. But that's we're not going to debate that. I just want to cover the main point of fact versus opinion. So if somebody states, there's too much testing in too much standardized testing in schools, it's based on opinion. It's a belief or a feeling. Prison is one of the worst places on the planet. Fact or opinion? That's a tough one. I'm going to say something like that. Prison is. A lot of people will say, yeah, it's a fact. It is the worst place. No, actually, it isn't. Some people actually think it's okay to go to prison. If that was the case, if it was a fact, it could be proven. But it can't be. It's an opinion. It's based on belief and feeling. Some people have no problem going to prison. They think it's all a-okay. Three hots and a cot. Number eight, it is wrong for people under the age of 21 to drink. Is that fact or opinion? Well, it may be law in the United States, although there are some exceptions, believe it or not. I know right here in Massachusetts, and I want to double check on that. When I was growing up, there was the father-son law. A father could give his son an alcoholic beverage within the home. Okay? That was called the father-son law. So in this case here, this is really opinion. Even though it's law, it's opinion. Because other countries have different laws. Most of Europe, the drinking age is anywhere from 16 to 18. I know in Canada it's 19. The last state in the country, Vermont, had the drinking age at 19, and then they changed to 21 because the federal government told them you can keep that law at 19, but you're not going to get any money for your federal highways. So it's kind of like the government said, yeah, you can do what you want, but we're not going to give you any money. So needless to say, they changed to 21. So although it's nationwide, it's 21. It's not really. It's one of these funny situations where, and I love going into the history of these things. All right, it's a case of, uh, it's the state's rights to have whatever they want for a drinking age, but the federal government steps in by stating if you don't do 21 as our guideline, you're not going to get money for your highways. So cash is king. What can I say? All right. Number nine, Sister Carrie was written by Theodore Dreiser. Fact or opinion? Well, that's a fact because all authors are in authorship is in record. So whenever somebody writes a book, publishes a paper, publishes a magazine article, it's a recorded fact. So that is fact. So number nine is fact. Number 10, Lord of the Rings, Return of the King won 11 Oscars, their Academy Awards. Is that fact or opinion? Well, it's a fact because awards are on record. You can go back and check it out, and you'll see that, yeah, it did win 11 Oscars. Okay? So now, ooh, the oil splatter on that paper. Gee, how'd that happen? Okay? Now, today's assignment, chapter 17, the river. Okay? Now, I don't have too many questions for it, but I want you to I'm going to read chapter 17, and I'm going to go over the three questions for chapter 17 because Brian is underway on his journey. Okay, it'd be nice to kind of do this out in the woods, but I don't have a hot spot. I might change that in the near future. Let's go to chapter 17, and we're going to read out loud the river. There we are, and that's on page 97. Their luck held. I'm going to do this, unfortunately. Where the river left the lake, it cut a deeper channel in the soft bottom. It took Brian a half an hour to move the raft down the side of the lake, pulling it along by hand, and where the river exited, he moved to the left shore and stopped for a moment. One last thought. He could still go back. It would be easy to take the raft back around the lake, and possible, though certainly not easy, to drag Derek back up to the shelter. Once they were on the river with the current, he would not be able to work back. In other words, once he goes down that river, it's now a point of no return. In fact, that reminds me about the river of no return. I should add in an extra assignment. But he hesitated only a moment. Any choosing was already finished, and he shook his head. It was done. He climbed back onto the back of the raft, kneeling at Derek's feet as he had before, and used the pole to push it away from the bank and out into the current. The river was 60 or 70 feet across, leaving the lake, and the current at the side seemed a bit slower. It caught the raft and pulled the nose around, and so it aimed downstream but along the edge, bouncing against the bank and sliding beneath over the overhanging willows and brush. Brian used the pole. The bottom was 4 feet down, and he pushed the raft sideways out into the center. It hesitated, seemed to move for a moment as if trying to find the current. Then the moving water caught the logs, and the raft started to move. Inside of 30 feet, it was matching the current or close to it, and Brian watched the bank slide past as the raft moved silently down the river. We're on our way, he said to Derek. It's working, and we're on our way. On the way. For 100 yards, the river moved straight, then curved hard to the left around a small hill, where Brian quickly found that the log raft is not the same as a boat. The current was not fast, as he had guessed earlier. It was about the speed of a person walking, but it was steady and strong. The logs were heavy, and once they were moving in a direction, they were hard to turn. As a matter of fact, Brian thought, watching the bank at the end of the curve come at him, they were impossible to turn. The river curved, and the left raft went straight, cut across the curve, and jammed into the bank. The jar of the sudden stop, even moving slowly, rocked the raft, and Derek rolled against the lashings and almost fell in. Brian leaped forward on the raft, fell on Derek, and held him while the raft lurched, slid sideways, and settled against a bank where it stuck in dirt and brush on the edge of the river. 100 yards, and they were stopped. Brian slid on the raft, waist deep in the water, pushed it sideways back out into the current, climbed back on, and sat for a half a minute while the river curved back around the right, and the raft jammed into the left bank. Another 50 yards, 150 yards, and they were stuck twice. Brian swore, I'm going to have to improve this, or we'll be a month on this river. He worked the raft in the middle again and started to move. This time, as they came into a shallow curve and the raft started to move straight, he waited until the raft was close to shore and used the pole to jam the bottom and fend off. He still shot wide on the turn, but they didn't jam into the bank, and by the fifth curve he had found a way to use the crude paddle to steer the raft. He would have come in close to shore on the inside of the curve, and then soon as the raft was around, he paddled the stern over and aimed it down the center of the river and fought to keep it in the middle. They still did not always stay in the center of the best moving current, but as the afternoon wore on, Brian found that by frantically paddling through each curve, he kept the raft almost at the speed of the current and away from any brush or snags on the sides of the river. It worked, but the river curved almost constantly, moving through small swamps and beneath overhanging trees so thick it seemed to be a jungle, and it was constantly fighting the raft. Inside of 3 hours, he felt his back and arms aching, and knew that if he didn't stop to rest a bit now, and then he would never be able to make it. He decided to stop every hour for 10 minutes. Derek had told him told him that what the military did on long marches, a 10-minute break every hour. And by the end of the fourth hour, he was more than ready for it. As it happened, the break came when the river straightened out, so he didn't lose any time. The raft kept sliding as he leaned back and rested his arms and back. He used his hands to cup water into his face, rubbing the back of his neck. The evening sun was still hot when it hit him as they came out of the patches of shade made by the trees on the bank, and the cool water on his neck refreshed him. Let's see how we're doing. He opened up the briefcase and took out the map. The river was accurately drawn, or seemed to be. As near as he could figure, they'd come about 8 miles. Not as good as he thought. 8 miles in 4 hours? 2 miles an hour. That means 50 hours. 2 full days on top of the day they just used making the decision and getting ready to go. 4 days without water for Derek. Now, that is the big reason why Brian made the decision to raft, to make this raft and send and do what you call a self rescue. Because remember what I said about water. Generally speaking, but not always, the human body can't live much more than 3 days without water. He looked at the unconscious form and saw that the sun had burned his neck where the skin was exposed. Well, if Derek couldn't drink, Brian could still keep him cool. That might help. He took his t-shirt off and soaked it in the water. Brian used it as a cloth to wipe Derek's face and neck with cool water during his break. This ordeal was amazing to him, and he wondered at how it could be. Things happened so fast, changed so fast. Derek had been, no, he thought Derek was still one of those people who seemed so alive. He was eager to learn, happy, bright. He seemed indestructible. Even now, lying on the side of his raft in the evening light, his chest rising and falling as he breathed, he looked like he would wake up any second. Cut down. That's how Brian thought of him. He had read a history of the Civil War, and the author had written about the men being cut down by fire. Get out of here, B. That's how Derek looked to Brian now. Cut down. How could that be? He was no different really. Had been in the same place at the same time and he was all right, and Derek was cut down. He wiped Derek's face several times, At this time, the raft had kept moving, and when his break was over, he saw that they were coming into another bend. He put the t-shirt back on, wet, and packed up the paddle and started to work, swinging the stern of the raft, keeping it in the middle of the current. It would be dark in an hour or so, but he thought that it wouldn't matter. His hands were raw on the rough wood of the paddle, and he thought that it wouldn't matter either. All that mattered now was to keep moving. Okay, let's go over some questions here. First one, did Brian have any thoughts of turning back? I'm sure it crossed his mind. Now, would that have been wise to do? Maybe not, because remember the 3 day rule, the rule of threes. 3 minutes without air, you know, 3 hours without shelter in bad weather, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food, 3 months without hope. In this case here, you know, he's going to go on that fourth day. I think Derek will be okay, but day five, six might not be so good. Brian discovered, second question, Brian discovered there's a big difference between navigating a boat or canoe and a raft. What happened that made him very much aware of that big difference? Well, number one, the current pushed him into the shoreline. He run aground on the shore into the brush. He found that the the raft is not that maneuverable. When the current gets it going, it seems to want to go wherever it wants to go. So whenever he has to come up to when he sees a bend, he has to start paddling frantically to avoid going into the shoreline. So that's the big thing, maneuverability. There's no maneuverability with this homemade raft compared to a canoe, kayak, or you know what, even a rubber raft, like that rubber raft that they sent back. Boy, I bet he wished he had that thing right now. Just both him and Derek could just float down there because they always have paddles. They would have just an easy time floating down that river, and if they did it just right, they would probably be able to do it in a relatively short amount of time. Third question. Brian is recalling from history class the carnage of the American Civil War. The teacher made the comment, cutting them down. What is cutting down Brian at this point? Okay, well, he's thinking about how Derek was struck by lightning and now is gravely wounded. He cannot care for himself. Just can't. That's what he's thinking about. Cutting down. He's thinking about. I'm also going to do a little bit of prediction. Okay, being cut down. This journey is going to wear on that young man. He's got a homemade raft that he has to somehow maneuver into. He basically has to navigate a homemade log raft, which can have some problems downstream, and hopefully to Brannick's trading post where he can have medical attention for Derek. Now, we have time. See, the chapters now are getting quite short. Like chapter 18 is just like 3 pages. All right, we'll do chapter 18 as well. In a night, that first night, he learned something about himself. Not all of them good. He had not slept the night before except to doze kneeling next to Derek, and when he worked hard all day on the raft, getting it ready, and when the sun went down and darkness caught him, he could not believe how much he wanted to sleep. There was no partial moon, a sliver, which gave him enough light to see the river, at least make out the main channel, but the light didn't help. Each time Brian's eyes closed to blink, they opened more slowly, and each time he had to fight to keep them open. The mosquitoes helped for a time. They came out in the clouds with darkness before the evening cool slowed them, and Brian tried brushing them away. away from his face and Derek's, but it was like trying to brush smoke. As soon as his hand passed, they settled again, whining in the darkness, and after a bit, he just let them eat and kept paddling. See, he started to become more stoic. You know, um, life is filled with adversity, and you kind of have to get used to that. That's like the Stoic philosophy. The Vikings were Stoics. Many Native American Indian tribes had a Stoic approach to life. Life is hard, cruel, sometimes unfair. You just have to deal with it. Sleep would take him between strokes of the paddle. It would stop him so his arms would fall and the paddle would stop and lay in his lap. Then he would shake his head and snap out of it and start paddling again just in time to make a turn, at least at first. Halfway through the night, nothing worked anymore, and his eyes closed and stayed shut. He dreamed mixes of things. His mother came to him sitting on the end of the raft. "It's all right," she said. "You can let go now. It's all right." And her voice was so soft, so gentle and soothing that he wanted to let go of it, let all of it go, not to be here, not even in the dream. He was not sure how long he slept, but when he awakened, the raft was drifting in a large flat plain of water, bobbing sideways. There was no sign of the river. In the faint moonlight, he could see no banks, no direction to travel. "But," he said aloud, the sound of his voice startled some large animal, and there was a loud splashing to his right. A large animal, he thought, perhaps a moose. That meant there was a shore, then a bank for an animal to run on. Close. So use thought, use logic, use it. Think. The river was flowing generally southeast. It must have widened into a lake. The moon. The moon was straight overhead when he went to sleep. Now it was down a ways to the right, down to the west. Like the sun, it rose in the east and set in the west. The moon was about halfway down from overhead in the same direction as the splashing animal. So, Brian threw water in his face. So the river had widened into a lake, but he had moved along the west bank. If he kept moving the raft with the paddle, he should come to where the river narrowed again and picked up the current. He started paddling, the raft moving sluggishly now that there was no real current. He bore to the right, moving the raft sideways as he paddled until he couldn't make out the shoreline in the darkness. Outlined in the moonlight, then he straightened and started paddling again, steady, reaching forward with each stroke, bending at the waist. Two on the right, two on the left, while the raft followed current well because the logs stuck down in the water and were not streamlined for the same reason. It moved with paddling horribly. "It's like paddling a brush pile," he said to Derek. "Nothing seems to move." And in truth, it was very slow. It was not moving more than a mile an hour, and he wished he could read the map in the darkness. He didn't remember this lake or wide place or whatever it was, but it was 2 miles long. It would take 2 full hours at least to cross it. Two on the left, two on the right. He slogged forward, and with the rhythm of the paddling, his brain settled into a numbness again, and soon he was in the same trance that led him to sleep. This time he stayed awake, but the hallucinations grew more and more intense. He saw the raft as a canoe and felt it fly forward with each stroke until he was leaving a wake of fire waves curling out in front of the raft, and he worried that it would catch the logs canoe on fire and burn them up. And how could water be on fire anyways? Now, why is he hallucinating? Well, lack of food. He's burnt up all of his calories. He's now going to whatever fat reserves he has in his body. So that can affect the mind. It's not, don't forget, you can go for a long time without food, but the fact remains, if you're laboring very hard, you still need to somehow replenish those calories. You're going to really slow down. He would shake his head and then see his mother again at the other end of the raft. She would change into his father, who was smiling and beckoning him to paddle faster and faster. And then Derek's breath grew louder and louder until it filled his head. The lake, the world with the rasping sound of his breathing, and Brian could hear Derek's heart as well, pounding on the logs of the raft, echoing until all he could hear was the keen rasp of Derek's breath and the pounding of his heart. He would shake his head, and the raft would be jerking forward in the faint moonlight. Derek lying on his side, Brian leaning forward at the waist, two on the left, two on the right, the paddle pulling at the water in swirls. Three strokes 4, and he would be under again. At one point, something came swimming up alongside the raft, a muskrat or otter or beaver, cutting a V in the water, and it swam next to Brian. In a fraction of a second, his mind had turned it into the head of some beast, some underwater monster with its toothed head waving back and forth, ready to attack and sweep over and take him off the raft with huge teeth. And he settled the paddle down and grabbed for the spear to kill the monster, make it go away before it could eat him. And he shook his head, and the vision disappeared as the animal dived, and the monster was gone, and he was alone with Derek again. He picked up the paddle and worked again, leaning forward. The bad thinking came somehow toward morning. Didn't know how it started, and would never know how it started, and later did not wish to remember it when he did. 2 nights without sleep tore at him, and the raft seemed to bolt it down as he tried to get it along the edge to the lake to where the river moved again. Somewhere there, as he tried to keep the raft moving and fought sleep, there the idea came, the wild idea, the sick idea. The raft moved slowly because it was heavy. What made it heavy sank in the water was so that it could not move was the extra weight of the man tied in the middle. If the man were gone, if the man were gone, it would be lighter, and he could move fast, and it would be better. It would be better if Derek were gone. What was the difference? He was dumb enough to rise up and get hit by the lightning, and he should be gone. Brian looked down at the still form and thought that thought, and it was so awful he did not believe he was thinking it. But it was there, the thought. If Derek were gone, just gone. Wow, that's something to think about. If Derek were gone, he's dead weight. Yet, Brian had that thought. If he tossed him over, hey, I couldn't do it. I had to save myself. None of this would have happened if Derek weren't there. None of it. And if Derek were gone, gone somehow in the water, gone down and down. No, he nearly screamed it, and at the sound of his voice snapped him awake, alert, and he touched Derek's leg to make certain he was still there. And Brian hadn't cut him loose in the night, and he would always be there, and that Brian would never even think the thought again, not even for an instant. All the way, he mumbled, reaching under the paddle end, we go all the way together. He paddled another half hour, fighting sleep, and then at the same time he felt the coolness that he knew was morning coming, and he saw the eastern sky was beginning to lighten. He stopped paddling, looking at the sky, and was amazed at how fast the dawn came. One moment it was so dark he couldn't see Derek on the raft, and the next he could make out the bank and see the trees in the gray light of dawn. And they were moving. The banks were moving along, even though he wasn't paddling. He'd done it. He was through the lake and had moved back onto the river, and the current had him. Thank you, he whispered, and realized when he said it that it was another kind of prayer, and it was grateful, not just for the river, the current, the movement, but the other thing as well. Coming through the night with Derek, grateful that he had made it. Thank you. Ooh, Brian had some interesting thoughts there. We'll get some questions here. It's more, one of them's more like your opinion. Self discovery is when you become aware of something about yourself that you never knew before. Have you ever discovered something about yourself that you never knew before? That's an opinion. Now, what has Brian discovered about himself at this point? One of those things is actually quite dark. Well, somebody talked about stoicism. Brian became aware of, he's becoming aware of the fact that he's stronger than what he actually is. He's able to do these things. The other thing that's he's becoming more aware of when he started to hallucinate from the working that raft and lack of food, he had a thought. He had a thought of just dumping Derek over. Survival of the fittest, survival of me. Why should I carry this clown out of the woods? I could make it. I'd probably have a better chance of making it without towing him along. But then he snapped out of it. So that's what he's discovered about himself. That sometimes you can have these bad thoughts. And the big thing is, at least my opinion, is not to act on that. Brian came close. He almost did. He almost came close to acting out on that particular thought of letting Derek go. What a thought. So, anyways, I hope that you guys have enjoyed or will enjoy this session. All right. Again, do your best to complete these assignments. I gotta do a little bit of cleanup here, but I was hoping this is kind of entertaining. And again, each day you're gonna have a do now assignment, 10 questions on fact versus opinion. It should only take you a few minutes at best. Please do them because they're very important. Okay? And so, on that note, I will bid you adieu. Have a great day.